The sun was high in the sky as an elderly black woman walked into the car dealership. She had been planning this visit for weeks, saving up for the right time to make a purchase. Today, she had finally gathered enough courage to buy the car she had always wanted. With her cane in one hand and a small purse in the other, she stepped inside the dealership with a quiet confidence. The car dealership was buzzing with activity, staff moving swiftly to greet customers and show them the newest models on display. As soon as the woman entered, a few of the salespeople exchanged glances, whispering among themselves. Their eyes briefly scanned her, taking in her age and appearance, and made an immediate assumption. They didn't think she would be serious about buying a car, and they certainly didn't expect her to be able to afford the one she was eyeing. A few of them chuckled quietly to themselves, some even rolling their eyes when they thought she wasn't looking. The woman, unaware of the judgment, approached one of the salespeople with a warm smile. "I'm interested in purchasing a car today," she said kindly. The young man standing behind the counter barely looked up from his phone. He responded with a dismissive tone, barely acknowledging her presence. "Okay, we have a few models over there." He pointed toward the far end of the showroom, still distracted by his phone. Feeling the cold treatment, the woman politely nodded and walked toward the cars he had pointed to. The models were sleek, polished, and exactly what she had in mind, but the treatment she received from the staff had already begun to weigh on her. She knew that they didn't believe she could make such a purchase, and it was clear in the way they avoided eye contact, in the way they were not eager to assist her. The woman knew she had to prove them wrong, but at that moment, she decided to hold her peace. She didn't need to say anything. Her actions would do all the talking. After a few minutes of looking at the cars, she quietly turned around and made her way toward the door. She heard a couple of the salespeople whispering behind her, assuming that she would leave empty-handed. One of them even chuckled, saying, "She'll be back next week when she can't afford it." They didn't know her story, didn't understand the years of hard work that had brought her here today. But none of that mattered. She had learned long ago that judgment from others did not define her. As she walked out of the dealership, she kept her head high, determined to return the next day, not just to buy the car, but to teach them a lesson about respect. Her steps were firm as she walked to her car, and although she had been disrespected, she carried no anger. Instead, there was something calm and knowing about her. The car dealership had underestimated her, and tomorrow they would find out just how wrong they were. The woman drove home with a quiet smile on her face, thinking about the next step she would take. She was no longer just a customer. She had become a force to be reckoned with. The next morning, the elderly woman woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. She had spent the night thinking about everything that had happened at the dealership the day before. The mocking glances and the dismissive attitudes of the staff lingered in her mind, but instead of feeling hurt or angry, she felt a quiet determination. She knew she wasn't going to let anyone underestimate her again. She spent a few hours preparing, getting dressed in a way that made her feel both comfortable and confident. Her outfit was simple yet elegant, just like the strength she carried within. She wasn't about to play into their assumptions. She knew exactly what she wanted, and that knowledge gave her the power to return to the dealership not just as a customer, but as someone with a plan. Before leaving, she called a trusted friend, a seasoned advisor when it came to financial matters and car purchases. The woman had always kept her financial affairs in order, and her advisor had been with her through many important decisions in her life. The friend was surprised at first, but agreed to accompany her, sensing that the woman needed someone by her side who understood both the financial side of things and how to deal with situations like the one she had encountered yesterday. As they made their way to the dealership, the elderly woman's mind was calm, and her resolve was unshakable. She didn't feel the need to rush. In fact, she was in no hurry at all. The journey was simple, but with each mile, her sense of purpose only grew stronger. She wasn't just coming back to buy a car. She was coming back to show that no one should ever judge her based on her appearance or assumptions about her. Upon arriving at the dealership, the familiar faces of the staff were there, but this time, something was different. The atmosphere had changed. The salespeople seemed a bit more alert, a little more prepared for what was about to happen. As the elderly woman entered, her calm presence filled the room. She didn't rush. Instead, she walked slowly and deliberately to the same section where she had been the day before. Her demeanor was respectful but firm. The staff noticed her immediately, but this time, they weren't making any assumptions. They quickly tried to approach her, but she raised her hand, signaling that she didn't need their hurried attention. The woman's presence was commanding without being loud, and the atmosphere in the dealership shifted. She wasn't just another customer anymore. She was someone to be respected. As she waited, her advisor stepped forward, explaining that the woman had done her research and was fully prepared to make a purchase. The staff seemed caught off guard, but they quickly tried to mask their surprise. They hadn't expected a return visit from her, and they certainly hadn't expected her to come back with the clear intention of making a deal. The woman's calm and quiet confidence left a lasting impression, and the salespeople began to see that this was not just any other customer. They had misjudged her before, but now they were beginning to realize that this was no ordinary situation. The woman didn't say much at first, but she didn't have to. She was there to make a point. She was more than capable, and no one would treat her like she didn't belong. The staff quickly realized that they had underestimated her, and the power dynamic had already begun to shift. The woman had taken control of the situation, and the dealership was left to adjust to the unexpected return of the woman they had once dismissed so easily. The elderly woman stood at the entrance of the dealership, her presence commanding attention as soon as she stepped in. She wasn't alone this time. Her trusted advisor stood beside her, exuding an air of professionalism that immediately caught the eyes of the salespeople. The contrast between the quiet woman from the day before and the confident duo standing before them was stark. The staff, who had once dismissed her as nothing more than an elderly woman who wouldn't be able to make a serious purchase, now found themselves unsure of how to approach the situation. The woman calmly surveyed the cars she had been looking at the day before, her gaze lingering on the sleek models with a thoughtful expression. Her advisor, standing beside her, was already reviewing the paperwork and discussing the finer details of car purchases. The salespeople, who had initially assumed they would deal with an easy, uninterested customer, found themselves slightly rattled. They couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt as they realized they had misjudged her from the start. It wasn't long before one of the salespeople approached, attempting to salvage the situation. His tone was more respectful than it had been the day before, but there was an underlying sense of nervousness as he spoke. "Good morning, ma'am," he began, his voice steady but a little unsure. "How can I assist you today?" The woman smiled politely but didn't immediately respond. She was in no rush. Her calm demeanor was enough to send a clear message. She wasn't here for pleasantries. She had come with a purpose, and her resolve was unmistakable. Finally, she turned to her advisor and nodded, signaling that it was time to move forward. Her advisor stepped forward, speaking directly to the salesperson. "We're here to purchase a car today, and my client has already done all her research. She knows exactly what she's looking for, and she's ready to make a deal." The words hung in the air, and the staff member's expression shifted. He was no longer dealing with the same woman who had walked in yesterday. This time, he saw someone who was confident, knowledgeable, and ready to make a serious commitment. The realization hit him like a wave. This was no ordinary customer, and his assumptions about her were completely wrong. A few moments passed before another salesperson approached, seemingly more prepared to engage. The elderly woman didn't speak much at first. Her eyes were calm, but there was a glint of knowing in them. She wasn't there to argue or prove anything. She simply wanted the respect she deserved, and she was going to get it. The staff seemed to recover their composure, offering more assistance, but the woman remained in control. She knew what she wanted, and she wasn't swayed by their attempts to upsell or distract her. They had underestimated her the day before, but now they were realizing their mistake. The dealership had lost their chance to treat her like just another customer, and now They had to earn back her trust and respect. As the conversation progressed, the woman remained patient and firm, listening carefully and asking questions with a calm authority. She wasn't making a scene or being overly demanding, but it was clear that she was no longer someone to be taken lightly. The power dynamic had completely shifted, and the salespeople knew that they had to treat her with the same level of respect and professionalism they would give to any high-paying customer. For the first time, the woman felt like she was being seen, not just as a customer, but as someone who had a right to be there, someone whose time and money were valuable. She didn't need to prove anything. Her presence and calm confidence were enough to ensure she was treated with the dignity she deserved. The elderly woman stood tall, her quiet presence filling the room with a calm authority. It was clear now that she was no ordinary customer. She had a purpose, and the entire dealership could feel the shift in the air. As the staff tried to regain their composure, she finally decided it was time to reveal just how wrong they had been about her the day before. Her advisor, still standing by her side, gave a knowing nod, as if to signal that the moment had come. She turned to face the salesperson who had approached her earlier. This time, her voice was steady, with no trace of hesitation. "I know exactly what I want," she said, her words calm but firm. The salespeople who had once dismissed her as an unlikely buyer now looked at her with newfound respect, but they still hadn't realized the full extent of her plans. The woman reached into her purse and pulled out a folder. She opened it slowly, her eyes scanning through the neatly organized papers inside. The staff watched her in silence as she took her time. It wasn't just about purchasing a car anymore. It was about something bigger. It was about showing that she was in control and that she was not someone to be underestimated. "I've been saving for this car for a long time," she continued, her eyes never leaving the papers in front of her. "I've done my research, and I'm fully prepared to make a purchase today. I know what this car is worth, and I'm aware of the details of every model you offer." The silence in the room deepened as the woman's words sank in. The staff had no idea what to say. They had assumed she wouldn't be able to afford the car she wanted, but now they were realizing how wrong they had been. Her financial acumen was clear, and her decision was not made on a whim. This was no ordinary purchase. It was a calculated, well-thought-out decision. The woman placed the folder back into her purse and looked up at the salesperson. "I'm ready to move forward with the deal. I've come here today not just to buy a car, but to do business in a way that's fair to both of us." The staff exchanged uncertain glances. They had expected a smooth transaction with someone who wasn't as prepared as she was. But now they found themselves in the position of needing to prove themselves. It wasn't just about selling a car. It was about repairing the trust that had been broken the day before. The elderly woman had already shown them that she didn't need their pity, their condescension, or their assumptions. She was here to do business, and they had no choice but to respect her for that. For the first time, the dealership staff realized that they weren't just dealing with an elderly woman who had been mocked and dismissed. They were dealing with a determined, well-prepared customer who knew exactly what she was doing. The power had shifted, and now it was up to the dealership to meet her expectations. The elderly woman remained calm and composed, watching the staff carefully as they scrambled to offer the best possible deal. Her quiet strength and sharp mind were enough to make them work harder, and it was clear they would have to prove themselves if they wanted her business. She had come to show that she was not to be underestimated, and her presence alone had already changed the way the dealership operated. As the elderly woman continued to stand confidently at the dealership, the shift in power became more and more apparent. The staff, once dismissive and unkind, were now scrambling to regain their professionalism. It wasn't just about selling a car anymore. It was about repairing the damage done the day before. The woman had come back not only to buy a car, but to make it clear that she would not be treated with disrespect. The first salesperson, who had initially tried to rush her out the door, now approached her with a hesitant smile. "Ma'am," he began, his tone much softer than it had been the previous day. "I just want to apologize for the way you were treated yesterday. We've had a chance to review the models you were interested in, and I think we can make a better offer for you now." The elderly woman didn't respond right away, but her calm demeanor made it clear that she wasn't here to listen to empty words or quick fixes. She had already seen through the salespeople's attempts to smooth things over. She wasn't about to let them off the hook so easily. "I appreciate your apology," she said, her voice steady, "but it's not enough. You've already shown me what you think of me. It's going to take more than just an apology to make things right." The salesperson nodded, a look of understanding dawning on his face. He had clearly underestimated the woman the day before, but now he realized that she was not someone who would let a mistake slide without consequences. He quickly stepped back and signaled for the manager to join them. Moments later, the dealership manager appeared, looking both nervous and determined. He had heard about the woman's return and the way the staff had failed her the previous day. He knew that if he was going to salvage this sale, he would need to handle the situation carefully. "Ma'am, I understand your frustration, and I want to make things right," the manager said. "We value all our customers, and we want to offer you a deal that reflects that. Let's work together and find something that fits your needs." The elderly woman studied him for a moment, assessing his sincerity. She wasn't looking for grand gestures or empty promises. She was simply looking for fairness. "I'm not interested in being treated differently because of the way you treated me yesterday," she said. "I expect to be treated with respect, like any other customer, no more, no less. If you're offering me a deal, it has to be the best one you can give." The manager, now fully aware of the woman's expectations, nodded in agreement. "Of course, ma'am. We'll make sure that you get the best possible deal, and we'll work to make this process as smooth as possible." For the first time in the entire exchange, the elderly woman allowed herself a small smile. She wasn't looking for revenge, but she was looking for a fair deal, something she had earned through years of hard work and dedication. As the manager and salesperson began to pull together a new offer, the woman remained patient but firm. She didn't need to rush. She knew that what she wanted would take time and careful consideration. The power had shifted completely. What had started as a simple transaction had become a lesson in respect, one that the dealership would never forget. The woman wasn't just buying a car. She was showing the dealership the true meaning of fairness and dignity. And as they worked to meet her expectations, she stood as a reminder that no one, no matter their age or appearance, should ever be underestimated. As the elderly woman stood in the dealership, the room had transformed. The salespeople, who had once looked at her with assumptions, were now focused on offering her the best deal they could. The elderly woman's composure had completely shifted the atmosphere, making it clear that she would not be treated as anything less than an equal. The manager and the staff were working hard, realizing that they had to earn her trust and respect, and that wouldn't be easy. The elderly woman's advisor continued to assist in the process, pointing out details that the salespeople had overlooked the day before. The advisor was knowledgeable, and the elderly woman's calm confidence only added to her credibility. She wasn't just going through the motions. She was fully engaged in the process, asking questions, reviewing the car's specifications, and ensuring that everything was exactly as it should be. It was clear to everyone now that this wasn't a simple transaction. This was a negotiation between two equal parties, not one party assuming superiority over the other. After a few more minutes, the manager returned with the revised offer. He had clearly put more thought into it this time, and the terms seemed fair. He presented the deal with respect, understanding that this wasn't just about selling a car. It was about restoring the respect that had been lost the day before. "Here is what we can offer you today, Mom," the manager said. "We've taken all your concerns into account, and this should meet the expectations you set." The elderly woman took a moment to study the papers, her eyes scanning over the numbers carefully. She had done her research, and she knew exactly what to look for. She wasn't going to let herself be tricked by a shiny offer. After a few moments of silence, she looked up at the manager. "This is acceptable," she said with a calm nod. But I'd like to include an extended warranty, just to be sure. If we're doing business, I want it to be thorough." The manager, already aware of her meticulous nature, nodded in agreement. "Of course, ma'am. We'll include the warranty at no additional cost." The elderly woman's eyes remained focused as she signed the papers, but there was a sense of satisfaction in the air. She wasn't just buying a car. She was closing a chapter where she had been dismissed and underestimated. And now she was walking away with the deal that she had earned. The process had been a reminder to the dealership and to the salespeople that respect and fairness were non-negotiable. As she finalized the paperwork, the staff began to acknowledge her with newfound respect. They realized that they had learned an important lesson. Never assume that someone isn't capable just because of their age or appearance. They had seen firsthand how this woman had handled the situation with grace and intelligence, and they were grateful for the opportunity to make it right. When everything was done, the woman turned to the staff and smiled. "Thank you for your time," she said politely, but her tone carried a quiet strength. "I'm happy with the deal. I'll make sure to share my experience with others." With that, she stood up, her advisor by her side, and walked out of the dealership. As she stepped into her new car, the staff watched her with a deep sense of respect. They realized that it wasn't just about the sale. It was about the way she carried herself, and the lesson she had taught them, that everyone, no matter their age or background, deserves to be treated with dignity. As the elderly woman drove away from the dealership in her new car, the silence in the dealership lingered. The staff watched her go, a mixture of emotions running through them. They had learned an important lesson in a very humbling way. It wasn't just the car sale that had left an impression. It was the way the woman had handled the entire situation. Her strength, patience, and dignity had left an indelible mark on everyone who had been involved. Inside the dealership, the manager stood by the counter, reflecting on what had just transpired. The elderly woman hadn't just walked away with a new car. She had walked away with their respect, and perhaps their admiration. Her decision to return the next day had completely changed the tone of the transaction. She had come in with the confidence of someone who knew their worth, someone who wasn't easily swayed by assumptions or judgments. She had not raised her voice, nor had she demanded anything. Instead, she had calmly made her point, asserting her right to be treated with the same respect as any other customer. The staff, who had initially doubted her, now felt a sense of shame. They hadn't considered the possibility that someone who looked different from their typical customer might still be a serious buyer. They hadn't seen the years of hard work and determination that the woman carried with her. Instead, they had made assumptions based on appearances, and in doing so, they had made a mistake they would never forget. The manager called a meeting with the sales team after the woman left. The dealership needed to address what had happened, and the staff needed to understand the impact of their behavior. "We've all learned something today," the manager began, his voice steady but filled with an underlying seriousness. "It doesn't matter who walks through those doors. We treat everyone with respect and fairness, regardless of how they appear. It's not just about the sale. It's about how we make people feel when they walk in here." The staff nodded in agreement. There was no excuse for how they had acted, and they knew it. It wasn't just the elderly woman who had been affected. It was the reputation of the dealership itself. Word of mouth could either bring in customers or drive them away. And in this case, they knew they had nearly lost an opportunity to do business because of their own biases. Meanwhile, the woman, driving her new car, felt a sense of satisfaction. She wasn't angry or bitter about the way the salespeople had treated her. In fact, she was grateful for the lesson that had come from the experience. She had known all along that she had the right to be treated with dignity, but this incident had reminded her that it wasn't just about getting what you deserve. It was about showing others the power of confidence, kindness, and patience. She didn't need to boast about her purchase. It wasn't about showing off or proving anyone wrong. The journey she had taken from the moment she walked into the dealership to the moment she left with her new car had been about something much deeper. Reclaiming her place in a world that often overlooked people like her. It had been about reminding the world that age, appearance, or background should never define someone's worth or capabilities. As the woman drove home, she smiled to herself, content in the knowledge that her quiet strength had made a lasting impact. The dealership had learned an invaluable lesson, and she had walked away with more than just a new car. She had walked away with the confidence that she would never again let anyone define her by their assumptions. As the days passed after her visit to the dealership, the elderly woman's story began to circulate. It wasn't just about the car she had purchased. It was about the way she had conducted herself, and how her quiet strength had left an impression on everyone involved. Word spread, not just among the dealership staff, but also to the people who knew her and even to the community. Her dignity and poise had made her more than just a customer. She had become an example of how to handle adversity with grace. The salespeople, who had once been too quick to judge, now found themselves reflecting on their actions. They realized that the woman had taught them an important lesson about assumptions and respect. The dealership, too, was changing. The manager had made it clear that no customer would ever be treated with disrespect again, no matter their appearance or background. What had been an uncomfortable and awkward situation had turned into a valuable lesson in humility for everyone involved. The elderly woman, however, didn't seek recognition or praise for what had happened. She wasn't interested in boasting about her victory, nor did she need to prove anything to anyone. What mattered to her was that she had been treated with fairness in the end, and that the dealership had learned something important. She had simply done what she knew was right, stood up for herself, and shown that she wasn't to be underestimated. In the days that followed, the dealership staff became more attentive and respectful to every customer who walked through the doors. They understood that their assumptions had cost them a valuable opportunity, but they also realized that their mistake could serve as a reminder to treat every person with respect, regardless of their age, race, or appearance. No one should ever be judged based on their looks, and they would now make sure that they gave every customer the attention and consideration they deserved. As for the elderly woman, she continued with her life as usual. She didn't dwell on the past, but she did take comfort in knowing that her actions had made a difference. She had shown that it was not enough to simply walk away from a situation when it wasn't fair. Sometimes you had to return, face the people who had made assumptions, and let them see that their judgment was wrong. And in doing so, she had not only earned a new car, but had also taught a valuable lesson to a group of people who needed it. Her story wasn't just about a car purchase. It was about standing up for oneself and showing that respect is earned through actions, not appearances. It was about challenging the stereotypes and biases that so often shape the way we treat others. She had become a symbol of quiet resilience, proving that a calm and composed attitude could change hearts and minds. The dealership, in turn, became a better place for everyone. It wasn't just about the transactions that took place. It was about the relationships they built with their customers. And all of that started with one woman who walked in with determination and left with not just a car, but with the respect of everyone who had underestimated her.